Who would have thought? Chad, a nation often shrugged off as just another dusty, landlocked African country, is playing with geopolitical powerhouses like a genius. While the West and Russia are locked in a messy global chess match, Chad isn't just a pawn, it's the player. By refusing to pick sides, Chad has done the unthinkable, keeping Western allies close while cozying up to Russia. And with Trump poised to re-enter the White House, Chad's position as the ultimate political opportunist is about to pay off big time. This isn't just survival, it's strategy. It's Africa rewriting the rules of the game. How is Chad pulling it off, and what does it mean for a continent on the rise? Buckle up, this is the boldest geopolitical play you've ever seen coming. Let's get started. The Sahel region is unraveling. Nations like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have all turned their backs on the West, booting out French and American forces in favor of closer ties with Russia. Yet Chad, surrounded by this chaos, stands firm as a Western ally. How? But it also hasn't left Russia's hand.
The leader of Chad is visiting Russia this week as Vladimir Putin continues his mission to extend Russia's influence in Africa.
But amid this, the West can't complain. And that's because of Chad's importance. Chad's strategic importance lies at the intersection of geography, leadership, and timing. Nestled in the center of the Sahel, Chad acts as a buffer zone against the spread of jihadist insurgencies. For Western powers like France and the US, losing Chad would mean losing the last stable foothold in the region. So, naturally, Chad has the upper hand, to a point where it can end up threatening the US. Never seen this being done by African nations. But Chad's survival isn't just about its location, it's about leadership. When President Idris Deby was killed on the battlefield in 2021, a rare occurrence for a sitting head of state, many predicted chaos. Instead, his son, Mahamat Idris Deby, stepped in, maintaining continuity and stability. This seamless transition starkly contrasts the coups and political turmoil engulfing Chad's neighbors. His rise was not merely a domestic political shift. It marked the beginning of Chad's heightened importance on the global stage, especially in the eyes of Western powers. Through a mix of strategic political maneuvers, regional stability roles, and calculated diplomacy, Mahamat solidified his position and made Chad an indispensable ally for the West in the volatile Sahel region. Mahamat Deby's leadership has been characterized by a strong grip on power. After taking charge of the Transitional Military Council, he initially promised a return to civilian rule within 18 months. However, his decision to extend the transition period and later run in the May 2024 elections, which he won, demonstrates his intent to entrench his authority. Winning with 61% of the vote, his administration has drawn significant criticism for its authoritarian tactics. This consolidation of power is precisely what the West finds appealing in a region plagued by instability. While his domestic policies raise concerns about human rights, they also ensure a semblance of stability, which is critical for Western counterinsurgency efforts. Western nations, particularly France and the United States, have maintained significant support for Mahamat Deby. This backing is driven by Chad's strategic importance in the Sahel, a region where insurgent groups have established footholds. Mahamat has positioned Chad as a critical ally in the fight against insurgency, leveraging its geographic location and military capability to secure Western support. France, which has faced growing anti-French sentiment across West Africa, views Chad as its last reliable partner in the Sahel. French President Emmanuel Macron's attendance at Idriss Déby's funeral signals France's commitment to the Déby regime. Similarly, the United States sees Chad as an indispensable player in regional stability, allowing it to maintain drone bases and counterinsurgency operations. By doubling down on authoritarian rule, Mahamat has delivered the stability that Western powers crave. This pragmatic approach ensures that Western nations are unlikely to press too hard on human rights, as their geopolitical interests outweigh their ideological concerns. But is the West really in control? This is where it gets interesting. The West thinks Chad is under control. It assumes Chad plays by its rules, taking orders and aligning itself with Western interests without question. On the surface, this narrative seems plausible. After all, Chad remains the last, steadfast ally of the West in the Sahel. But dig deeper, and you'll find a very different story. Chad isn't the obedient partner the West imagines. Behind the scenes, Chad is playing its own game, deftly leveraging its importance to extract concessions and benefits from France and the US. It maintains the appearance of loyalty while quietly ensuring that its interests always come first. Take, for instance, the rising anti-French sentiment sweeping across the Sahel. In Mali and Burkina Faso, the people have outright rejected France's presence, leading to the expulsion of French forces. Chad, however, has adopted a subtler approach. It hasn't expelled French troops, but it hasn't embraced them either. By walking this fine line, Chad positions itself as a critical ally while giving its people just enough freedom to express dissent. This is more than diplomacy, it's strategy. Chad knows that its role as a Western partner makes it indispensable. It uses this position to secure economic and military support, all while exploring partnerships with Russia to keep its options open. This balancing act is as impressive as it is essential. In a region where countries are forced to choose between East and West, Chad refuses to be boxed in. It's a masterclass in diplomacy, survival, and asserting independence, proving that even in a world dominated by superpowers, small nations can chart their course. But how far can it go? Let's dig into how Chad manages to court both the West and Russia without burning bridges. Can Chad be friends with both Russia and the West? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Picture this: Chad at a geopolitical poker table, calmly playing its hand while the West and Russia try to outbid each other for its loyalty. It's a dangerous game, but Chad is winning. Chad's relationship with Russia is growing rapidly. President Mohamed Debi's recent visit to Moscow wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a calculated move. During the visit, discussions ranged from military cooperation to cultural exchanges. The opening of a Russian cultural center in N'Djamena was another signal that Chad is ready to explore this partnership. Russia sees Chad as a strategic gem. Unlike Mali or Burkina Faso, Chad has managed to retain Western alliances while showing an openness to Russian influence. For Moscow, this is a golden opportunity to deepen its presence in Africa without facing immediate Western retaliation. But here's the twist: Chad hasn't abandoned the West. US drone operations continue to operate out of Chad, and France still uses the country as its primary base of operations in the Sahel. Chad understands that these relationships provide critical security and economic benefits. This dual approach, embracing Russia while maintaining ties with the West, isn't about indecision. It's about maximizing options. Chad's leaders are pragmatic. They know that putting all their eggs in one basket is a recipe for disaster. Instead, they're playing both sides, ensuring that if one partnership falters, another can fill the void. However, this balancing act isn't without risks. The West isn't thrilled about Chad's growing ties with Russia, and Russia knows it's competing with entrenched Western influence. And Chad is benefiting from it. How so? Chad's ability to engage with Russia gives it significant leverage over its Western allies. The US and France, wary of losing yet another ally in the Sahel, are forced to tread carefully in their dealings with Déby. This dynamic is most evident in Chad's dealings with France, the former colonial power. France has a major military base in strategic locations across Chad. Losing access to these bases would be a severe blow to French operations in the Sahel, especially after being expelled from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Recognizing this, Déby ensures that Chad remains indispensable to French and US interests while making it clear that his country will not hesitate to diversify its alliances if necessary. For instance, in the lead-up to the May 2024 elections, Déby temporarily asked US Special Forces to leave Chad. However, after securing his electoral victory, he allowed them to return. This calculated move demonstrated Chad's willingness to exert control over its partnerships, reminding Washington and Paris that their presence in Chad is a privilege, not a guarantee. And then, Russia's growing popularity in Chad reflects a broader trend across Africa, where many nations view Moscow as a less intrusive partner compared to the West. Unlike the US and France, Russia refrains from pressuring African governments to adhere to democratic norms or implement reforms. This approach resonates particularly with younger urban populations in Chad, who harbor widespread anti-Western sentiments. The Russian influence also comes with tangible benefits. While military cooperation remains limited, for now, Chad has gained a platform to push back against Western criticisms, particularly from Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron's private lobbying for a more democratic transition in Chad and ongoing judicial probes into alleged corruption involving African elites have irritated Déby. By aligning with Russia, Chad signals its displeasure while ensuring that it has alternatives to Western partnerships. Chad's geographic position makes it uniquely valuable to both Russia and the West. It borders Sudan, Libya, and the Central African Republic, all of which are embroiled in conflicts that have drawn significant foreign interest. Chad serves as a critical conduit for arms and supplies flowing into Sudan, a nation torn apart by civil war. Its proximity gives Chad a strategic advantage in influencing outcomes in the region. To the north, Libya's instability presents both challenges and opportunities for Chad, as the country positions itself as a stabilizing force in the region. In the south, the CAR remains a hotbed of conflict, where Russian military contractors, including the rebranded Wagner Group, maintain a significant presence. Chad's ability to navigate these regional crises further enhances its value to global powers. For Russia, it offers a gateway to expand its influence deeper into Africa. For the West, Chad is a bulwark against the loss of more ground to Moscow. By playing Russia and the West against each other, Chad secures more than just political leverage. It gains tangible benefits. Western military aid continues to flow, ensuring that Chad's armed forces remain well-equipped. At the same time, Russia's growing presence provides Chad with an alternative source of diplomatic and cultural support. This strategy allows Chad to avoid overdependence on any one partner, giving it the flexibility to adapt to shifting global dynamics. For President Déby, this balancing act is more than just a diplomatic success. It's a testament to Chad's ability to assert itself as a sovereign nation capable of shaping its destiny. But why doesn't the US or France stop Chad from collaborating with Russia? The West is nervous. France and the US are watching Chad's growing relationship with Russia with a mix of anxiety and frustration. They see the symbolic visits, the opening of Russian cultural centers, and the whispers of military partnerships, and it's clear this isn't just a passing phase. But here's the catch. They can't do much about it. Chad's importance to the West can't be overstated. It's not just an ally. It's the ally in the Sahel, a region where Western influence is collapsing like a house of cards. For the US and France, losing Chad would mean losing their last foothold in the region. This dependence gives Chad immense leverage. It knows the West can't afford to lose it, and it's not afraid to use that leverage to its advantage. One of the clearest examples of Chad asserting its independence came when France tried to meddle in its political decisions. After the death of Idriss Déby, Paris pushed for Souk Masra, a figure aligned with Western interests, to be appointed prime minister. Chad's government under Mohamed Idriss Déby flatly refused. This was no small act of defiance. It sent a clear message to France. Chad is not a puppet state. This balancing act between maintaining alliances and asserting independence is a tightrope walk. But Chad's leaders are navigating it masterfully. Another factor complicating the West's position is the growing anti-French sentiment within Chad. Protests calling for the withdrawal of French troops have become more vocal, mirroring the movements in Mali and Burkina Faso. However, unlike its neighbors, Chad hasn't expelled French forces outright. Instead, its leaders have allowed the sentiment to simmer without letting it boil over. This strategy is deliberate. By allowing these protests to exist, Chad pressures France to offer better terms in their partnership. At the same time, it reassures domestic audiences that their concerns are being acknowledged. It's a clever balancing act that keeps everyone guessing, but ensures Chad remains in control. And then there's Russia. By deepening its ties with Moscow, Chad is sending an unmistakable message to the West. We have other options. This isn't just a bluff, it's a calculated move designed to keep France and the US on their toes. For Chad, aligning with Russia offers a range of benefits, from potential military partnerships to increased diplomatic leverage. And for the West, the idea of losing Chad to Russian influence is a nightmare scenario. The US and France know how quickly Moscow has gained ground in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, where military regimes have expelled Western forces in favor of Russian support. Chad's courtship of Russia forces the West to tread carefully. Push too hard, and Chad might pivot further towards Moscow. Too little pressure and the relationship deepens anyway. It's a lose-lose situation for the West and a win-win for Chad. Ultimately, the West's hands are tied. Chad's geographic and strategic importance, coupled with its demonstrated independence, makes it too valuable to risk alienating. The US and France are forced to adopt a cautious approach, balancing their desire to maintain influence with the reality that Chad has options beyond the West. This delicate dynamic underscores just how much leverage Chad holds. By playing its cards right, it has turned its position as a Western ally into a tool for securing its sovereignty and shaping its destiny. In the rivalry between Russia and the West, Chad is proving that even a small nation can wield big power. But how does Donald Trump's presidency factor into this equation? Donald Trump's return to power is shaking up the global order, and Chad is poised to take full advantage. Trump's America First policies emphasize transactional relationships, which could work in Chad's favor. Under Trump, aid and development programs may take a backseat to security-focused partnerships. For Chad, this isn't a problem. Its role as a counterinsurgency hub makes it a valuable partner for the US. Trump's administration may be more interested in maintaining military operations in Chad than in lecturing it on democracy or governance. But Trump's policies could also create opportunities for Chad to deepen its ties with Russia. If the US becomes less predictable or reduces its financial support, Chad has already laid the groundwork for alternative partnerships. China, too, is watching. As Trump reshuffles America's priorities, Beijing could step in to offer Chad investments in infrastructure and energy. The United Arab Emirates and Turkey are also in the mix, making Chad one of the most sought-after players in Africa. Chad's ability to navigate these shifting dynamics is nothing short of remarkable. But it raises a broader question. Could its strategy serve as a model for other African nations? Here's the big idea. Chad's strategy isn't just about survival, it's about leadership. By refusing to be boxed into one camp, Chad is showing Africa that there's another way to engage with global powers. Traditionally, African nations have been pressured to pick a side, either align with the West or embrace Eastern powers like Russia and China. Chad is breaking that mold. Its ability to maintain relationships with multiple partners is a lesson in how smaller nations can maximize their influence. This approach is already inspiring other African nations. Senegal, Ghana, and even South Africa are exploring ways to diversify their alliances. Chad's success proves that Africa doesn't have to be a battleground for foreign powers. It can be a player in its own right. So, what's the takeaway? Chad isn't just surviving, it's thriving. In a world dominated by superpower rivalries, Chad is showing that even the smallest nations can wield immense influence. This isn't just a story about Chad. It's a wake-up call for the entire continent. Africa is no longer a pawn in the global game. It's becoming a player. And Chad is leading the charge. The world should take note because if Chad can pull this off, it's only a matter of time before the rest of Africa follows suit. And when that happens, the global balance of power will never be the same. Do you think that instead of being used, more African nations should use the West? Is this the only way out of Western exploitation? Let us know in the comments section. Do you think Western nations can ever control Chad? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.